Welcome to the 2013 AFFR Talkshow. Well, the wonderful thing about film festivals on architecture, you see such a variety of films. And now we're going to talk about short films and the way the filmmakers approach their subject. We have three wonderful films and people from the UK too, and one from Italy. And they're showing their skills in these short films. We have Jonathan Gales, who made an animation film on the right side. We have Peter Spence, on the left side. We have Peter Spence on the right side. We have Jonathan Gales on the left side. And in the middle, Lorenzo Tripodi from Italy. Well, let's start with the animation. Let's have a look at the film. What did attract you to use architecture for animation, computer animation?
Thank you. While studying in the UK during my Part 2 in my Masters, after completing a lot of the technical requirements, I studied in more an experimental college, and our studio used animation as a drawing method. So a lot of us in our studio were using animation and filmic techniques to explore architecture and to tell narratives about design.
So a lot of architects are working with this kind of animation, and it has become so sophisticated. And of course, a lot of filmmakers make use of it.
Yeah.
So why are you developing that skills? To be a better architect or to make films?
Well, I think
in the end,
obviously within architecture, the use of animation and fly-throughs is a really good explanatory tool. But for us, I think that's somewhat purely just a tool. For architecture, for me, I wanted to explore much more what architecture truly is, and kind of the creation of narrative and space, and to do that through kind of fiction and film rather than purely through building construction. Creating films about buildings or about spaces I find personally a little bit more interesting, so I wanted to pursue working within the film industry as well as being trained as an architect.
Mm-hmm. But normally that animation is used for buildings that have to be built. And now there's only the suggestion. It's a more or less a cinematographic experience. And then you go into the world of storytelling and the narrative, and you're not trained to do that.
That's true, but animation's been used within architecture for decades already within the visual effects in the film industry, with films like Inception and even films like coming out now like Gravity, where the whole filming process has changed because of the way that animation has changed, and the architecture of actually creating a film and the production behind a film I find kind of comparable to the production of a building and the construction process, especially with the people involved, the creative direction. There's a lot of parallels, so I think there's lots of different ways of thinking about it, but that relationship I'm very much interested in.
Yeah. But you were educated as an architect. Have you decided that animation is the end result already because you're working with other people in a studio doing the same things as you?
Well, I think when I studied architecture within the UK, there's lots of different ways of studying architecture. Like I said, I come from more of an arts background where we talked about narrative and we talk about why even kind of build a building. If we're kind of telling stories about space, firstly, as an architect, you have quite a public responsibility to actually construct something. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm much more interested in about creating space and telling stories within it. So working within the realms of film and fiction is more of a kind of way that I reside.
Okay, so what will be the next step for you then?
As a studio with another colleague who's here with a couple of films, we set up an animation studio in London where we've been producing short films, our own creative projects, and we're working on a range of design projects.
So you do short films on projects on architecture? You're hired to do that?
Well, self-initiated creative projects where we try and get a project going, which we concept or work with a writer. We also work with directors and production companies doing design of environments for television and film. working on a kind of feature development at the moment. But we also kind of have commercial representation to do adverts and commercials where we use our skills from animation and architecture.
Okay. Well, let's move from the artificial world into the real world. For example, the real world of a new town north of London. Let's have a look at your film.
These houses were built in the late 60s. There was a lot of ideas about the way people should live. A garden in the middle, put the road around the outside so you have a safer space.
Milton Keynes was then developed, in the early 70s, throughout the 70s, but the film that I made was about an estate that the designer of Milton Keynes made just before he moved on or was given the opportunity to be the master planner for Milton Keynes. And that's an estate in Leeds called Newton Garth.
Mm-hmm. The first generation who went to live in Milton Keynes got lots of critics because people thought that living outside the real city, which was London, and go somewhere in the north, and they lost a sense of life, and it was all so planned, and they got all these negative connotations with those new towns. But there, suddenly you live in Milton Keynes, eh?
No, I don't. No.
No.
But I live in an estate designed by Derek Walker, who was the same designer.
But you show the happiness of living in a city like this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's an interesting point because I've been with my friend who lives here now, but he lived in Milton Keynes, and he found it a soulless experience actually living in Milton Keynes. But that's a whole city, whereas the estate that I live in is in a very sort of mixed area of styles, where we have late 60s houses of the type that I live in, sitting right next to 19th century houses, and new builds. So maybe there's something about that kind of mix of housing styles and periods that is more accommodating and engaging for people.
But what was the real reason that you were so attracted? Let's make a film about it.
Well, because I'd moved. It was my first experience of living in a modernist house. The modernist project in the UK didn't take off in a big way. With the exception of tower blocks, low-level modernist housing didn't really happen in the UK in the same way as it has here and in the rest of Europe. So that was an attraction for me to live in a house like that, and so it got me thinking about the role of British modernism, and it also got me thinking about this, the idea that an architect might do a kind of dry run, or he might do a smaller project in build up to a grand project like Milton Keynes, and that's so whether he. I don't think he'd actually been appointed as master planner for Milton Keynes when he designed Newton Garth, and yet there are so many parallels between the types of housing, between the house that I live in now in Leeds and Milton Keynes housing, that you could see that he was. It's exciting because you can kind of see what he's thinking about, and it's a bit of an experiment maybe for him to roll out this type of housing on a grand scale, as he did in Milton Keynes.
It's so funny to see the world, how it could be in animation, and how utopia was created and is still alive and valid, I would say, in a city like Milton Keynes. And now we go to another utopia, which is a kind of tragedy in Russia. And Lorenzo Tripodi has made a film about that. Let's have a look at the clip of your film.
Условимся раз навсегда. Жилище есть основной камень жизни человеческой. Примем за аксиому. Без жилища человек существовать не может.
Moscow, capital city of Boscan. Instead, we found an opaque and unfriendly metropolis, noisy, polluted,
I went there, visited it once, I think 15 years ago, and it was in a bad state. And I returned 2 years ago, and it's even worse, and nobody seems to care anymore. Was that the reason why you wanted to make this film?
Well, actually, we are doing a project trying to assess different outcomes of the modernist ideology all over the world. The idea of having a sort of universal principles that should be fitting for all kind of society and all kind of territory, and actually how they manifest in the reality on the different places. And when we were invited as an artist collective to produce a work for an exhibition sensitizing the public about the constructivist heritage, it was for us a wonderful opportunity to visit this place. And we simply discovered the incredible richness of ideas. And
it was, well, it must have been a shock.
Actually, it was, but I wouldn't say that was the Narconfin state the shock in itself. I would say most visiting Russia today in general. Mm-hmm. I mean, what we found in Narconfin is just a consequence of incredibly complex and critical social and political process that has transformed Russia in what is today. The story in itself is quite fascinating, starting from the moment right after the revolution in which constructivists and architects and artists, together with avant-garde artists and thinkers of any sort, were just elaborating wonderful ideas for the new society, for creating the new man. And somehow, suddenly, all those was swept.
Right. Everybody in those years looked in the Russian direction because that was the new world, like everybody's looking in the Chinese direction. I wouldn't say that what the Chinese are building now is an example for us, but that was an example. So you made a film like a pamphlet, I would say.
I would say yes. It's quite difficult to be so assertive about a culture and a story that is not yours. So actually, our group has a kind of, let's say, psychogeographical approach in getting lost in places that we don't know and trying to transform it in something to tell. So basically, this is a personal journal.
You had the possibility to show it to Moscow authority?
Not yet. We are quite curious to see. For the moment, it doesn't look like anyone in Moscow is interested in watching our film.
Well, I got this idea because this utopia still works. You could make a film about the Narconfin building, how it should look like, and maybe the life inside it, or maybe how it will be destroyed in due time. It would be a wonderful combination to think about that. I just ask a question. Would it be interesting for you as an animator to show a building how it will develop?
One of the things which I think is completely fascinating about a kind of proposition like that is the kind of what-if scenario. And what I find fascinating about like film, whether it's animated or visual effects or live action or whatever, is the kind of life and inhabitation of architecture after the design has been concepted, and how we kind of see and experience those buildings later down the line. So to see the kind of degradation or the inhabitation of something is, yeah, definitely a fascinating idea.
So I think there's a possibility of using animation in any other film just to express what could happen or to express a scenario, like you say. It would be a wonderful opportunity to join hands, or what? You're shaking?
No, I was nodding. No, I think from the point of view of a filmmaker, and especially an architectural filmmaker, animation is such a powerful tool, and it not only does it improve the quality of your work immediately by just having that kind of multimedia element, but it also, like you say, it expresses things that you're not going to be able to express just with footage, with video. So animation is something I'm keen to start using, yeah.
Well, the image is always a very strong element. Of course, Lisitsky used it, and he convinced his clients with it. And well, let's think about it. After the festival, maybe we can work it out. Well, for this moment, I want to thank you for your time. And thank you for being here, show your wonderful films. Thank you again. It's always too short.
That's good.
Thanks a lot.
But
That was good.
thank you
It was
very
a nice
much.
chat.